We do have a jam-packed meeting. I am going to turn it over to our Toastmaster of the day, Toastmaster David Carr.
Thank you, Lois. As most of you know, the main centerpiece of today's meeting will be a guest presentation. Now, we've done these periodically. At some point, I think maybe we were doing a few too many and people felt like they weren't getting enough chances to actually come to the club and speak and participate. Fortunately, Jesse is actually planning on a presentation that will include some participation from all of you. But in the past, we've had people to talk on different technical topics, such as presenting on Facebook Live, different techniques that you can apply, as well as just some very experienced Toastmasters, and at least one world champion of public speaking has come and visited us, Darren LaCroix. And we are honored today to have with us Jesse Scinto. Now, the inspiration for inviting him is he wrote an article called "The Camera Never Lies," which was about being on television. And part of it had to do with the fact that even though he coaches executives and other people on how to be ready for an opportunity like that, when he got his chance, he didn't necessarily live up to his own expectations. And so he set about researching what it is that we can do to prepare better for the TV experience. Jesse's the founder and CEO at a company called Public Sphere LLC and a lecturer in Columbia University's Graduate Strategic Communication Program. I didn't realize at the time, but in addition to that, The Camera Never Lies, he also wrote one of the Toastmasters magazine articles about online clubs that Graham was quoted in, our own Graham Cairns. And so he knows something about the subject. One of the things I had an opportunity to chat with him about in advance was how we can use this kind of online meeting environment to prepare for at least some aspects of the TV experience, such as speaking or presenting to an audience that's not in the room with us, that doesn't laugh at our jokes. Maybe here we get to see them more than we get to see the audience, but still it's a little bit of preparation. But there are also things that are very different, because here we get to control the camera setup and the lighting. And that's a burden, but we also do have control over it. Whereas when you go on TV, you don't have control. Somebody else is in control, and you have to fit into the format. So we're hoping for a great presentation from Jesse. And Jesse, you're on.
All right. Well, thank you so much, David. And I hear your applause. Thank you. That was such a great introduction. And I really loved what you said about expectations, because that is really what it's all about. When we speak to audiences, the audience has expectations for us, and we have expectations for ourselves. And I know that all of us here in this meeting, a lot of us have a lot of public speaking experience, and we still work to try to improve our public speaking, to try to improve our online presence. We still have expectations for ourselves that we're trying to reach. So I think that's such a fitting introduction. As I mentioned before, I've been a Toastmaster for 10 years. I've been writing for the magazine for 4 years. And I actually just looked that up beforehand. It's been 4 years. And one of the things I really enjoy about writing for the magazine is that I get to meet people like you. It puts me into contact with new people. But also that it allows me to turn my personal experiences into learning experiences. So often my articles come out of my own desire to learn something for myself so that I can improve, and then to share that with other people. And that's exactly what the genesis of this current article was, Camera Never Lies. And so I thought what I would do is just tell you a little bit more about how that came about, why I was in Bulgaria, why I was on Bloomberg TV. some of the things that surprised me about being on TV there, what I learned, and then we'll do a workshop on eye contact. Eye contact for the camera, which is different from eye contact for face-to-face communication. And I'll say more about that. So I was in Bulgaria on a Fulbright award. By show of hands, who's heard of Fulbright? Okay, a fair number of you, most of you. It's an educational exchange program that is funded by the US State Department and other governments around the world. And basically, it sends professors and students from the US abroad, and it brings professors and students from abroad to the United States. The idea is peace building. We're gonna learn through cooperative education. We'll learn from each other. We'll build bridges, and the world will be a more peaceful place. So really noble goal to it. And I chose to go to Bulgaria because I'd actually been there once before, believe it or not. In 2015, I had spent 6 weeks in Istanbul leading some communication workshops. And as a vacation, a treat to myself, I went to Bulgaria in my last week while I was there. I went with Diane Rubino, who I know has been a member of this club. She's actually not here because she had another engagement, but Diane's my partner, my life partner. And so we traveled to Bulgaria together in 2015, and seemed like a cool place, and that's why I applied to go there. When I was in Bulgaria, I taught a full course load at the American University in Bulgaria. I had 2 undergraduate courses, one in persuasion and one in strategic communication. And I taught an executive MBA course in business communication. And then I had 2 seminars for working journalists. This was a program for journalists who wanted to improve their English language skills, wanted to network with other journalists in Bulgaria. And I was teaching executive presence and public speaking to journalists. And you might wonder, well, why would journalists, I mean, some of them were on-air talents from radio or television. Why would they be working on their public speaking with me? Well, believe it or not, even though they're comfortable, some of them, even though they're comfortable in front of the camera, they're not comfortable face-to-face. So I actually had something to share with them, and then I had something to learn from them by being on TV. So among my students were some on-air anchors for Bloomberg TV. And after our 2 seminars, they invited me to be a guest. And because they knew that my subject was persuasion, they wanted me to comment on Mark Zuckerberg's testimony before Congress last year and to talk about his persuasiveness, whether I thought he was persuasive. So it sounded like an exciting challenge. I've not, aside from, well, I didn't mention this. When I was younger, I used to be a musician, and I did appear on TV as a musician, but that was a completely different thing because I didn't have to talk, I just played my saxophone. So other than that, this was really my first appearance on television. So I prepared, as you might expect, as you would prepare for a speech. I did my research. I read up on the Cambridge Analytica scandal. I watched some of the testimony. I couldn't make myself sit for the full 5 hours, but I watched some of the testimony. And then I read what other people were saying about the testimony as well. And of course, I didn't have any inside information on this to bring to the table, but what I was bringing was my knowledge of the study of persuasion. And so then it was time to be on television, and this is kind of where the surprises started happening. One of the first surprises is I asked, well, what time should I get there? The show goes on at 1:30 in the afternoon. What time should I get there? And they said, well, just come about 10 minutes early. 10 minutes early? I mean, what happens if I get stuck in traffic? So that was one of the first surprises, that it was kind of casual, more casual than I expected. And I, in fact, did get there plenty early because I didn't want to get stuck in traffic. But another surprise about it was there wasn't much discussion of the questions in advance or even what I would say about it. So I kind of had to come up with my own questions that I anticipated would be asked and then practice for those questions on my own. So I actually had Diane help me practice, which was really crucial, because what I discovered when I started practicing with Diane, she asked me the first question and I got caught, started stumbling right away. And I'm like, oh, wow, like, good thing I'm practicing because I don't want to be on the spot when I'm on television. So that practice was really useful. And showed up at the studio. I thought there might be makeup. No makeup. Just before I went on, there was a translator. I neglected to mention that this was going to be live translation. So it was the interviewer, it was a translator, and it was me on the set. I met with the translator just beforehand just to go over, I mean, he didn't even know the questions. So just to go over what I would talk about to make sure that he had the language, that he knew the words to use in Bulgarian to translate what I was going to say in English. And so that was the little bit of prep there. And then we went right on. And the final surprise before we went on was that there were no camera operators. It was all robotic. So they just mic'd me up, put me on the set with the two others, and we went right at it. Now, what I'd like to do is just share a little bit of this video with you. I'm going to share about 90 seconds so you could see what I'm talking about, and you could see what some of the challenges were. And so I'm going to share my screen. I assume I can do that. Let's see.
Jesse, just so you're forewarned, when you do the screen share, there's a little checkbox. If you want the audio to come through, you have to check the checkbox to say the audio should be shared also.
Okay, hold on.
And you need to check that checkbox before you share.
Before, okay.
That's the trap for young players.
Yeah. Now, I remember encountering this before, but okay, so where's the checkbox?
When you hit share, bottom left, there should be computer audio.
There it is. Okay. Now, move that to the side. Make this a little bit bigger. Can everyone see that? Now my mouse stopped. Hold on one second. Okay.
Фейсбук Кембридж Аналитика, а вторият опитът за убийство и отравянето на бившият агент Сергей Скрипал. Джеси, добър ден, добре дошъл в нашото студио, благодаря, че...
I should mention I look different because I lost a lot of weight since then. On purpose. That'll be a different presentation.
Поканата ни. За мен е удоволствие.
Добър ден, Далян. Thank you for having me. It is a pleasure.
За мен също удоволствие. Джеси, ще започнем с темата около Фейсбук и Кембридж Аналитика и двудневните изслушвания на Марк Зукърбърг, главният изпълнителен директор на Фейсбук, пред сенаторите и конгресмените. С какви доводи успя Марк Зукърбърг да убеди законодателят, а и публиката, че Фейсбук е една социално отговорна компания, грижаща се за своите потребители, въпреки многократните скандали от създаването на Фейсбук до ден днешен? Знаем, че неговата реч беше подготвена, добре дирижирана, добре режисирана.
Yeah, the main thing that Zuckerberg had to do during his testimony.
Основното, което Зукърбърг трябваше да направи по време на своето изслушване, е да демонстрира, че той притежава почтен почтеността, авторитета, за да поправи това, което се случи.
Ingratiate himself with
Той трябваше да...
Congress. He had to make himself.
Okay, I'm going to pause it there. So that gives you just kind of an idea of what it was like. So, I mean, it was tough. It was hard to have the two people speaking at the same time and keep my own train of thought. And then when I watched it afterward, first of all, there's kind of these, long pauses while I'm waiting for the translation and they're waiting for the translation back. But then the thing that leapt out at me right away was my eye contact and how I was breaking eye contact for a long stretch of time. I don't know if you noticed that. I mean, I highlight that in the article, so you might have noticed that. When I was speaking, it didn't seem like I didn't notice it at all. It was only when I watched on video afterwards. And it's like, oh, I could do better on that. So which is the ray of hope, right? When we see ourselves on video, we see what we can improve. And then we can coach ourselves to do better. And that's often, I tell people, like, that's often the best we can do is just coach ourselves in the moment. There's no such thing as perfection. There's just self-coaching and improvement. And the other thing I noticed, I didn't really like the way that my suit looked. It looked kind of wrinkled to me. Probably no one noticed it too much. Maybe bothered me more than anyone. But that was the genesis of the article. That's what set me off. I'm like, how am I going to do this better next time? And who can I talk to give me some tips here? And I ended up talking to two different media trainers about exactly this type of thing. And what I learned was, well, first of all, something that I noticed myself was that the camera exaggerates everything. So what seemed like a small break in eye contact all of a sudden looks like a big break on camera. It seemed like a little rumple looks like a big rumple. It seemed like a short pause seems like a long pause. So the camera exaggerates everything. And it picks up things that you wouldn't necessarily notice. So that's why the article is called "The Camera Never Lies," because even though it can be useful to speak, to practice in front of a mirror, or to check our look in front of the mirror, we don't always see everything the way that a camera sees it, and so I think the camera adds that an extra dimension to our self-coaching that is so useful. And it's painful at first, but the more you practice with the camera, the better you get, then it becomes less painful. But there's always regrets, right? There's always what we hope to say and then what we actually said. And it's always like that. So I want to pause right here before I go on any further, because I'd love to get some reaction from you, either to the video that I just showed, or if you've read the article, some reaction to the article. I'd love to hear what you think about it. Do we have anyone want to volunteer to speak? Yeah,
Elaine.
I was watching and listening to the whole translation process, and oh my goodness, that you didn't have a chance to practice that in advance. That was a sorry state. You kept your composure well, but even for someone in the audience listening, the layering of the different simultaneous translation and you speaking made it, I think, near impossible for the listener to get the full impact of what you were saying. So I think it was very sad for you that it was set up like that, really.
Well, yeah, well, thank you for your compassion there. Yeah, I will say, like, it's one of the things that we kind of take for granted in Toastmasters is, to some extent, we have the ability to set the stage for ourselves. And And we don't always get that when we go out into the world. You know, we try our best, but then some things are just unexpected. I don't know, other comments, other reactions?
Well, I mean, I did wonder that, you know, the translation was, you know, a very specific situation that others might not face even in a TV scenario. We have Jacinta on the line. Her camera's off, but I'd love to hear from her because she had an opportunity to be on local TV news recently, and I know was looking for some coaching for that. Nick, you also wanted to ask something?
Yes, thank you, David. One of the key things that we learn in Toastmasters is to speak. We also only on one or two occasions learn to speak when others are speaking. And that's why I really fully understand what Elaine was saying, that when somebody speaks, I normally shut up. So because it's I don't know, I guess it's a reflex or something. So in order to actually go through that process and keep a train of thought and actually give a cogent answer was very admirable. And I think that this is something that perhaps, you know, we need to, in our club, perhaps just step it up a little and have some real world examples and practice for ourselves in order to actually go out in the real world, as Jesse mentioned. Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks for that comment. You know, one thing I would say is it also makes us appreciate, like usually in Toastmasters, when we're granted the platform, it's ours. You know, there's no interruptions, and it's a beautiful thing. It's great for a supportive environment, and I think we need to appreciate it.
I see Carol wanted to ask something, and also Graham. Oh, Lois too.
Thanks, David. I actually have been on television with a translator. So Jesse, I'm feeling for you. I think the part that bothered me about your video was listening to the volume that was going on, volume of your translator, volume of you. If they had set it up differently, I think it would have been better for you. I was in Mongolia, and when I was there, I was on TV with translators, but I was also on teaching with one translator. And so everything I said had to be translated. And it was absolutely a phenomenal experience. But what I found was we actually had to turn off our ear to that translator. It's similar to singing. And I know that might sound a little strange to you, but if you're singing in a choir, you have a group of people standing around you. And if you're right on the edge of your group of singers, the tenors or the sopranos might be singing something different, and you have to turn them off so that you stay focused with your tune. It's very similar. It's actually not a bad experience if you want to continue. So I'm not actually asking a question. I'm sorry about that, Jesse and David. But I just wanted to, I feel the compassion here, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you're taking on this topic. Thank you.
Oh yeah, thank you. And I love that example from singing. I once was in a choir for about a year, and so I kind of know what you're talking about. And I'll say that one of the other things I did when I was in Bulgaria is I did some teaching in translation. I only did it once, but the difference was that I would say what I had to say, then the translator would translate, and then I would speak, and then so there's only one person talking at a time. It wasn't simultaneous. It was linear, which was easier.
Graham?
On a wider note, Jesse, you're a journalist. You're used to asking the questions. As Toastmasters, we're used to being in control. I know that in the old advanced manual, communicating on television and then communicating on video, I think it was renamed, there was a two-part project where you got to be the interviewer and you got to be the interviewee. As somebody who's used to asking the questions, can you give us any tips on what to do when you're not in control, when you don't know what you're going to be asked, and you also have to deal with the camera?
Yeah, so, I think you the best thing that you could do is try to anticipate the questions, come up with your own questions, and maybe even to ask for someone else to throw you some curveballs when you're practicing, something that's not on your list, because you're going to get some of those that aren't on your list. And one of the things that I learned from working on the article was that the importance of having the first thing that you say be your strongest point. I mean, that's more so on TV than it is in a speech. Like in a speech, we have a little more latitude to build up to a point. In fact, sometimes a speech is more exciting if it builds. But on television, it's like, say your most important thing first and then kind of fill in the details. So that's why I called it inverted pyramid, because that's often how news articles are written. So that's the way I would practice. I would actually write out my questions to myself in advance, write out my answers in advance with my strongest point first, and then get someone to help me practice while throwing me curveballs. I think that's the best type of practice.
All right. Lois, you had something you want to throw in?
I did. Thank you, David. Jesse, I have actually two questions, and one is tagging along after Graham's. So I understand you would try and find out questions in advance and get the curveballs, but based on the way the whole thing was set up, would you have tried to have changed that setup or controlled it a little bit differently now that you've watched it and you've experienced it? If you had to go into this situation again, what advice would you give to your younger Jesse so we could learn? Is there anything you could have provided?
Okay.
Yes, that's a great question. So if it were up to me, like if I had full reign, if I could be the producer or whatever, I would not do an interview like this live. Instead, I would do it recorded, and I would edit it so that it looks like he's asking the questions and I'm answering them, and there's not the overlap of speaking. That would be the ideal, I think, for this. Barring that, I was able to watch someone else, another Fulbrighter, do the same show a few weeks before me. So like I kind of knew what I was getting into, but I didn't really know what I was getting into. I mean, once you're there on the stage and you're already nervous because it's different from the usual. It's different from the usual, right? So you're already at a heightened state of nervousness, and then it's
Okay.
just out of the ordinary.
So I had a two-part question. The second one was, at some points it looked like you weren't looking at the camera, and I was kind of curious as to what were you looking at? Were you a deer in headlights just trying to pay attention to the translator, or were you looking at the gentleman who was throwing, all I could understand was Zuckerberg and Facebook? So what were you paying attention to, and were you directed to pay attention to a light somewhere that we always hear, look at the camera, there's going to be a light or something like that? So just curious.
So actually, before I answer that, let me just ask Jim, 25 minutes, does that mean we've been going for 25 minutes? Yes, okay. And David, how much time do I have left then?
Well, I don't know. I think we're enjoying the conversation.
Okay,
I'm not inclined to cut it off. You talked about wanting to fit in a little bit of an exercise, so maybe we'll try and wrap up in the next few minwe and move on to that.
Okay.
So,
sure,
but if people have questions, that's great. We were looking for some interaction with the whole group. Andy, do you have a question as well?
I need to answer Lois's question first.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
yep.
so yeah, she had a part two, and now Lois, I forgot what part two was.
What were you looking at?
What was I looking at? Yes, I was looking at the interviewer. So generally, if you're on an interview panel, you look at the interviewer, not directly at the camera. Sometimes, like I've observed television shows which are kind of like panel style, like for instance, 5 at 5 on Fox News. where they will, if they're talking to each other, they look at each other, but then every once in a while, one of them has a straight to camera commentary. And so if you watch them, like I watched them at the studio, you'll see them shift, and it looks kind of weird when you're in the studio, but it looks really natural on camera. So yeah, just looking at the interviewer.
If I can add something there, because it is actually important, I think, to follow up with something Jesse's saying. A couple of years ago in Australia, there was a panel discussion involving leading politicians who were standing for Prime Minister. And one of them reacted to the interviewer the way Jesse is suggesting. You talk to the interviewer, they talk to you. The other would look at the interviewer for the question and then turn to the camera and address the audience directly, which somebody had obviously told him was a good idea, but it very nearly cost him the election because it was so frightening. If you are staring down the barrel of the camera in an interview situation, it tells the audience that you're not interested in the question, you're interested in your answer.
It's a nice way of putting it. Absolutely.
Andy, last question, I think.
Jesse, one question that I noticed when you were responding to the interviewer's questions, your sentence structure was sort of long. And the reason why I was curious about that, particularly doing an interview in another country, is that I thought that one of the keys about doing an interview, particularly live on television, is that you keep your answers short so that when they edit the program and send out the program, that they have not given them enough room to edit your comments in such a way that it comes out with a different meaning. If you have shorter answers, it's harder for them to do editing on what you're saying. What are your thoughts about that?
I think that's a good point. Yeah. I mean, that wasn't really top of mind for me in the moment. I was just focused on speaking slowly because I didn't want to outpace the translator. But I think, you know, especially in our domestic environment where, you know, people are grabbing, I mean, sound bites, you know, it's 6 seconds, 7 seconds, people are grabbing things, taking them out of context. It's it's much more tricky here, especially if you're high profile. Yeah, I was just more focused on speaking slowly.
Okay.
All right, so what I thought we might do in the next 5 minutes or so is just to try some of this eye contact. As I mentioned in the article, that the expectation for eye contact on camera is close to 100%. So if you watch network television, they're speaking and the anchor speaks straight to camera. If they have 3 panelists, they might be all their faces are on screen speaking and they look straight at the camera. In everyday conversation, eye contact is around 60%. In a face-to-face speech, we might try to get a little bit higher than that, be a little bit more deliberate. We'll try to get close to 100% for on camera. So I want to give this a try if we have some volunteers, and we'll all observe and see how you're doing. But I'm just going to give a question prompt, which is to talk about your career path. That prompt will serve as fodder for you to practice eye contact. Does anyone want to give this a try? Okay, Jim, I saw your hand go up. So why don't you talk about your career path? I'll give you, maybe a minute or so. I might ask you to pause, but just try to focus directly on the camera while you're speaking.
Okay, well, I'm one half of Geeks on Tour, and together with my wife, Chris, we produce a weekly class on technology for travelers. We teach people how to take photos and how to enjoy their travels with their Google Maps and blogging, and it's just a wonderful way to make a living. We've been at this since 2003. It's been a really fun trip. We sold our house in Fort Lauderdale and got an RV, and we've been traveling the country full time without a stick and brick house for 14 years. And now we have a townhouse back in Fort Lauderdale. It's been
All
a
right,
wonderful
Jim,
time.
pause there. How's Jim doing? Good. Jim, you did really well. Yeah.
I get a lot of
good.
practice.
Okay, good. Someone else want to give it a try?
I do have a question about what Jim just did, because he is a professional at this. He does it all the time. But Jim, you didn't blink. You went like almost the entire time without blinking. Did anybody else notice that, or was it just me?
Yeah, I noticed.
Okay. Okay. It just seemed very
I see Bushin.
On
was
glare
indicating
glasses
you.
makes a difference too.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I can go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Please.
Okay, so what's the question?
Question is just to talk about your career path.
Okay. So for most of you, you know me as a data scientist. That's how I appear to most people because of my email signature. But many years ago, I was just a lonely programmer. I was writing code, and I was learning how to understand what a customer wants from the data. And over the years, I have grown to become asking questions. And Toastmasters came along the way, and I've also done project management. And I think a couple of years ago, I finally realized that I need to put all of these skills together. You know, take project management, take data analysis, take Toastmasters. You know, all these skills are part of me. And eventually, I landed a job at my current company, Ascension. And
Okay, Bushan, pause there.
Okay.
Because I just want to get a check. And so how's Bushan doing?
My observation would be that Bushan is doing quite well, although he is blinking a lot, and having had Jim's lack of blinking brought to attention, that became even more obvious. And the other thing that I did notice that Bushan did a couple of times was when he was thinking, he did what we all do. You look up to the right or you look down to the left to think about what he's saying. And of course, that meant that he then moved off the camera, or at least his eyes moved off the camera. So I think he's doing okay, but yeah, it's a learned skill.
Yeah, it's definitely a learned skill. And I would say I noticed that darting as well. So I call that darting when your eyes go up or down or to the side. And you're exactly right, Graham. It's, you know, when we're trying to think of what to say, we often do that. The other thing that people do is sweeping. Well, this is more for a face-to-face audience, just kind of sweeping back and forth. And one of my interviewees talked about ping pong eyes. So if you're on a panel, you know, like you're looking back and forth, you know. So yeah, you're trying to minimize that, and one of the things that comes up often is that people don't even realize they're doing it until they see it on camera. So that's why you have to see. That's why the camera never lies. Someone else want to give it a try? Okay, I'm not sure how to say your name. Psychashore?
Yes.
Okay.
I am probably the newest member of this club and the youngest as well, but I'll give a try at mentioning my career path till now. I've always thought of Steve Jobs' quote as my life-defining quote. We can't connect the dots looking forward. We can only connect them looking backwards. So I did a mechanical engineering undergrad with a minor in computer science from India, and I had my Toastmasters background. Then I realized I was both good at technology as well as management. That helped me choose my career path as engineering management, and I am right now at Dartmouth College in New Hampshire pursuing my Master of Engineering Management. Moving forwards, I would love to have a career in product management. I would like to take all my skills from Toastmasters, from the extracurricular activities, and from the skills that I've gained in my engineering and in my masters into the industry.
All right, how did he do? Yeah, good job. Good job. That was really good.
Okay, great. Toastmasters needs your skills.
Yeah, so one thing I'll say, and then maybe we'll pause here unless anyone else has a burning desire to give it a try, is that I always tell people there's no such thing as perfection. There's only self-coaching. You know, we try to be more deliberate. We try to make more eye contact. There's no such thing as perfection. And when I observe, you know, since writing the article, I've become very observant of what people are doing on television. And you'll actually see that there's a whole range of behaviors on television. Not everyone has mastered this, and some people have been on TV a long time and they haven't mastered this, and they still do fine. So, you know, really what we have to do, we have to be authentic. You know, same thing that's important for speech. We have to be authentic, be our authentic selves. But I think coaching ourselves a little bit more toward deliberateness can be really useful, especially if your spontaneous gestures and eye contact don't help your message. If they're distracting from the message, you coach yourself to be more deliberate. So, so that's what I wanted to share with you today. And I'm happy to continue the dialogue if anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn or to email or whatever you want to do. I'm happy to continue dialoguing about this. But thanks again for the opportunity.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. I did want to take a moment, Jacinta, could you share a little bit about your television experience? And I don't know whether you've been able to watch the whole program, but how does his experience compare with yours? What observations can you share?
Sure. Thank you so much, David. And thank you, Jesse, for presenting a very interesting presentation today. I know TV and sounds like a couple other individuals have had the opportunity as well. It can be a bit challenging. I believe most of us go in thinking there's going to be makeup, there's going to be camera, there's going to be people around, and that's not necessarily the case. You come in with what you have on, and that is pretty much how the interview goes. But I received a lot of great feedback from individuals from our club, Andy, and also from Jim Barber. And speaking in sound bites is important, especially when it comes to interviewing on the camera, because most of the time you don't have as much time as you thought that you did. I thought that we were going to be able to speak for at least 20 minutes, maybe 30. And I was sharing the interview with another individual that works with me as well, and you don't have as much time. It's very short. So I believe knowing what your message is going to be and thinking of what would be those very impactful, punchy statements that you can give to the audience, because that may be all that you will be able to say. Andy mentioned something that was very important that I didn't really think about, and one of those questions could be about anything happening in the field of dentistry. So Andy mentioned to me, and I appreciate this, Andy, so much, that they could ask me something about the American Dental Association's stance on blah, 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 on fluoridation in water, or about dental caries. And even though that's not what we were going to be speaking about, I had to mentally prepare myself to be asked those off-the-wall questions in the event that they came up, because if you're not able to answer it, or if you pause for a really long time on video, on camera, it doesn't look good. It looks really, really bad. It really does. So for instance, we pause for impact to make sure that we're getting the audience's attention, but on camera, it makes you look like you don't know what you're talking about. Like you do have to kind of like rapid fire, what in the world is it that I have to say? I mean, if you saw the video, you know what I'm talking about. So that would be some of my experiences. I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. You don't know what question you're going to ask, but just having those really impactful sound bites together, because that may be all that you're going to be able to say. And I don't know about you, Jesse. In my experience, because we were being videotaped with a news anchor, I felt really rushed, because they have a short amount of time for their movies, for the actual segment. They have other individuals going on. In our case, it was with our local ABC news station. And so they had, The View was on before, The View ran over. So they were really short on time, but I felt very, very rushed. I need to say what I need to say really quickly.
I actually had the opposite experience, because I had 20 minutes. So I literally had 20 minutes of interview. So I was kind of shocked that I had so much time. I mean, it went by quickly, but I really like your point about the sound bites, because I think that's, that's another thing that my interviewees mentioned. And it just seems so important. And, sound bites are good for speeches as well. We can build sound bites into our speeches. To me, a sound bite is just like a pithy way of saying something. It's maybe there's some alliteration, or there's some chiasmus, or there's some kind of rhetorical trope that you use to make it stick. Those are things that we can brainstorm and work into our speeches as well.
All right.
If I can add something on that sound bites, because that's important to this discussion. As a working radio journalist, it's those sound bites that get replayed throughout the day as part of the news service. So if you want to, and Jesse said, put the most important stuff up front. That's the standard inverted pyramid. When you're being interviewed, say the most important thing that you've got to say first, and say it in under 7 seconds. You will find that will get used throughout the day, and you will suddenly become an expert, and you're being spread across the entire day, which is a wonderful thing, because that means they're going to call you back and they're going to use you more often and all that sort of stuff.
All right, son. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you.
Now we've gone with a fairly loose meeting structure. I did steamroller right past the part when I'm supposed to introduce all the people who are playing supporting roles and helping us stay organized, except for our timer, Jim, who's had to put up with us with kind of this loosey-goosey time frame too, in terms of when exactly we would be wrapping up. But this has been a great discussion. I hope you've enjoyed it. We do have some time for table topics, and then I'll encourage the people who are filling the supporting roles to explain them a little bit when the general evaluator calls on you, why we have these roles in the club like chat monitor and watcher, so we can squeeze that in at the end. But now it is my pleasure to introduce our table topics mistress, dominatrix of the day, Elaine Nieberding.
Well, thank you, Toastmaster of the Day, David Carr. I have never been called a dominatrix before, but I'm sure there was someone else who will call me that from time to time. We're here in November. It's November 4th. It's the 11th month. The theme here is all things 11. So the first question, all listen. In the Northern Hemisphere, November often means readying for colder winter weather, and the opposite in the Southern Hemisphere. Tell us what you're loathing or loving as you are preparing for seasonal weather changes. Nick Lacani, what are you loathing or loving about preparing for these seasonal weather changes?
Thank you, Madam Topics Master Mistress Dominatrix. What am I loathing about the weather? I mean, let's just get down to it, okay? What am I loathing? Well, what I had to do was to scrape ice off our windows of our cars last week. We had the first frost. And you know what happens when you get the first frost? You reach for the de-icer, you reach for the scraper, oh, I knew I should have got something from the store back in September. Oh dear. Now, how do I explain this to my Home Minister, who is waiting for her car to be made nice, warm, and clear to look out of? What is it I love about the changing weather? I love the fact that you can actually go and not only talk outside, but see yourself talking. Go and practice those breathing exercises. Expel that air and expel the bad things that you have in your body out, and you can actually see it as well, because you're walking in the nice, crisp,
fresh, icy air. Back when I was a kid, we never had the cold. I lived in a hot country. Nowadays, yes, I appreciate it. I wouldn't like to live in Buffalo, but I'm happy in Manchester. Back to you, Elaine.
Thank you so much, Nick Lahani. Also, when we think about 11, sometimes you hear the term the 11th hour, which means waiting or delaying to tend to something until near the deadline. So recall or make up a story about something that you left undone until the 11th hour. And when waiting provided a benefit or a boon or a blessing. Anne Marie, when did you wait till the 11th hour and it provided a boon, a blessing, or a benefit? Unmute, Anne.
Okay. Hello, everybody. I'm sorry, being late. The first time, like I'm one person that goes really to 11th hour on a constant base, just at the last minute. A habit that has to be modified a little bit. And the worst time is when you have a deadline to meet and still you're there in front of the deadline and you're not ready. And someday you have to come up with something. And this has been like the most challenging things in my life. Sorry, I have to think an event that happened. Like last week, even the Toastmasters, where everything was prepared and then has to be undone until the last minute. The waiting, sometimes it's like you cannot wait until you're done. And finally, when you're there, then it becomes so much easier. And when you're done, you just go, oh, and was it worth? Yes, it was. Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you, Anne Marie. And I actually recall coaching you a little bit about preparing for your icebreaker speech, and then you got the benefit. You won the best speech of the evening. How about them apples? That was something. Okay, here's the next question. Listen up, everybody. You're 11 years old. Recall something funny or memorable from when you were 11 years old. Not quite yet 18. Viviana, tell me a recollection of when you were 11 years old. Unmute, please, Viviana.
I think when I was 11 years old, I started to rebel and I moved to a big city and left my parents and stay with my relatives. I think maybe I wanted to prove that I was grown up enough to take care of myself. And that was a change in my life, that from leaving the comfort of my home to stay with other people. And I learned to, for example, to go to school by myself, like by bicycle. And even though I was not quite teenagers yet, or that I learned to live I mean that the phase living between the childhood and teenagers. I think that marks the years that I want to learn to be independent. Back to you, Elaine.
What a brave thing to be faced with and move forward with when you were 11 years old. Congratulations, Viviana. Do we have time for one more question?
Sure do, yep.
Okay. The next question. If November was somehow respelled as Newvember, and it was like a magic wand was waved to empower you to approach or experience something differently at this 11th month, what would that be? November becoming Newvember. Trisha. Newvember for November. Unmute.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, impromptu. Let's see if I can practice the skills we've been talking about. What comes to my mind, November. I'm in the Midwest, so we just had a time change this last weekend. So for me, I guess, I don't know if I'm even answering this right. November, it would be really nice if we didn't have to change time at all, but we gained an hour of sleep. So I can be a testimony of the benefits of that 1 hour of sleep. I learned that the average sleep, well, as a nation, we are sleep deprived, and I'm personally an example of one of those people, probably. And the average length of time for sleeping is about 7 hours. So getting that extra hour of sleep, even in one day, can make such a big difference in the start of the week. So that was my experience this week going into November. So I would like to see that change so that either it's going to be acknowledged that way or just no change at all. So yeah, because some states don't have that change. I don't know if that's better or worse. So for whatever it's worth, November, the other changes that we've had in the Midwest is the fall leaves. We just experienced like prime fall, and that's always beautiful. So to me, it's refreshing. You get the cool, crisp air. Just a nice change of just the temperatures, and like someone brought up, killing the germs. Just a different, we get all the seasons here. So that's always refreshing. So to me, I get renewed every season.
Thank you, Trisha. That will now wind up our table topics. I'd like to ask our timer, did our different participants all qualify for being voted on?
Okay. Yes, I'll put those in the chat. They all qualify. Nick was 147, Anne Marie 119, Viviana 123, and Tricia was 132. They all qualify. Go ahead and vote for your favorite.
Okay, our vote counter for the day is, let's see whom that is.
Me now. It's
That's
Graham,
Graham.
and I'm down as vote counter Graham.
Okay, please send your vote either for Nick, Anne Marie, Viviana, or Trisha to Graham.
You send that via private chat, by the way.
Yes.
If you'd like to, Jesse, if you'd like to vote, you are welcome to vote. And while that is going on, let me ask our general evaluator, Patty Adams, to help bring us in for a landing.
Thank you so much, Toastmaster of the Day, David Carr. It's been a pleasure to be in a part of this meeting. Thank you, Jesse, so much for bringing us a very important topic on The Camera Doesn't Lie. We're going to go straight to the reports for the sake of time. And remember, when you're giving your reports, to tell a little bit about what your function role is. I'm looking forward to everyone being extremely photogenic. So we will start with the grammarian, Mike Wash. Would you give us your report, please?
Sure. The function of the grammarian is to, of course, look for some of the perhaps imperfections in our language where we can improve, and what are we doing well? Perhaps we can do a little bit of alliteration, and I've noticed that tonight. I'll make this short. I essentially got so involved in Jesse's presentation that I really struggled to find something, although I did notice that he started off with a treat to myself, which I think I kind of thought of that myself. So I'd like to thank Jesse for that. I did notice some alliteration from Nick and from the First Frost. And of course, you can see yourself talking. The other thing I noticed was Trisha in the prime fall, right in the middle of the fall. And well, I'll keep it short, Mr. or Madam General Evaluator.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gomery and Mike Wash. And we will continue with Carol Prahinsky as our watcher. Will you please tell us your role and give us what you saw today?
Well, thank you, Patty.
You're welcome.
Today I get the opportunity to stare at you and figure out what I like or don't like about what I see on the screen. So my focus predominantly is on things that I could see as needing a little bit of buffing. And so I apologize if I step on some toes. But my first comment is, Graham, I love your vote box. And I know apparently it was a little hard to find, but your vote box is fabulous and I appreciate it. It does look like you're a little bit washed out with the lighting. I might make some adjustments to your lighting so that your face is more beautiful for us. Willie, as a guest, I don't normally pick on guests, but I have to say I miss seeing your face. It's a little bit low on the screen, and so I almost feel like I'm looking at Kilroy. Is it Kilroy from World War II? And so that's what I'm seeing. So come on out and show us your beautiful face. In Sakashore, I see a shadow on the wall behind you. So maybe another light would enable us to see you and focused on you. You have a shadow on your face. So additional lighting on your face might help, but be careful not to wash it out. Evan, I would suggest adding a few shoe boxes under your computer if possible. You're looking down towards the computer and we want to have you looking straight at it. And this, by the way, was a suggestion from Roger, and I myself have learned that not that long ago. I saw you waving at a friend and it didn't come across super well. I thought you were waving at us and then maybe there's something important, so be careful with that. We had 7 people tonight at one point without a camera on. I know we had a couple extenuating circumstances, but we wanted to pay attention to that because especially if we have a guest on, that might not be perceived so positively. And we want to make sure that we're coming across really well with that. So more people with the video on, that would be great. Jesse, as our special guest, I have a few comments for you as well. Right now, the light is on the back of your head. And so it almost has a halo effect. I might suggest adding maybe a light on the side to focus towards your face. Also at one point, the top of your head had been cut off. Now I see the whole face, but at some point there was just the top of your head being cut off. So Viviana and Lois, you have doors opening to the outside. Your scenery is beautiful. I like most of the scenery that I see, and so I'm absolutely thrilled to be enjoying the outdoors with you. Thank you so much. Back to you, Madam General Evaluator Patty Adams.
Thank you so much, dear Carol. And next, we will have our chat monitor, Andy Byrne. Will you give us your comments, please?
Thank you very much, Patty. What I noticed in the chat monitoring is the club has learned the etiquette of not typing fervorously while people are talking, so you're typing in between, and therefore it's demonstrating that you're paying attention to what's going on at the presentation. That's a very positive sign. We've had an interesting thing is when you look at the club and the chats, you recognize how global this club is. We have 5 people from outside the United States, and we have a whole bunch that are all over the United States, with the exception of South Florida, where the club started, thanks to David. But I think that the global nature of the club lets you know that our club is one of diversity and shared experiences, but diverse experiences that comes from around the world. And it's reflected in the statements. I'd like to encourage everybody to go to the bottom of the chat box and save your chat, because there are some words of wisdom that are captured in the chat, and you can each benefit from it. So don't forget to check on Save the Chat before you close out.
Thank you very much, Andy. We appreciate it. And then Jim Barber, who is serving as our counter. Will you give us your report, please?
With pleasure, Madam General Evaluator. As the counter this evening, my job is not to pay attention to how photogenic everybody is, but rather when you don't have anything to say, don't say it. And I must report, everybody did very well. I'm not a fanatic about eliminating all ums and ahs. It's just a matter of eliminating those that interrupt what you're doing. So for 3 people to note, first of all, David Carr. Congratulations, David. Very, very few ums and ahs. That's quite an accomplishment. Good for you. Tricia. Yeah, Tricia, you had more than a few. Not a problem, but just work on that. Knock a few of them out. It'll be a little bit stronger. And finally, Anne Marie. Anne Marie, you had 1. Normally, I would not care about 1, but you followed your with a sorry, which brought everybody's attention to what you had just did. So if you say 1, just keep right on going, and we probably won't notice. I certainly won't, Madam General Evaluator.
Thank you so much, Jim Barber. I will keep my comments brief. Make sure you get your votes in because soon I'll be calling for the winner. So if you haven't done that, now's the time to do it. Jesse, great job. I am going to give you just a really tidbit of an evaluation because technically I should not evaluate you, but I feel like I should do this right now. I really enjoyed some of the things that you said, like going from personal experience to learning experience. That was extremely well. Very good exercise that you did, that you had everyone participate in so they can learn the importance of looking straight ahead when they're doing a camera type interview. And then of course, building sound bites into your speech. One of the things I would say is just maybe, when you're going, I just said, getting ready to do a presentation, to just check your equipment up front to make sure that it's working, make sure that you can actually do the YouTube video, whatever video that you're showing, the sound, share screen. And I'm still learning as well, so I'm not picking on you. I'm telling you that because I want us all to get better. But overall, you did a fabulous job, brought us a lot of information. I am going to read that article because I don't know where it's located. So maybe you can let us know which actual magazine it was in so we can go back and find it and read it for those who haven't had an opportunity to do it.
I'll send the link in the chat box.
Awesome. That would be great. Thank you so much. And that is all that I have. So I will ask for our vote counter, Graham, to please let us know who won table topics.
Thank you, Madam General Evaluator. Ladies and gentlemen, the Best Table Topics Award. Oh, that was wrong. That way. There's the award. I am pleased to say that there were votes for all of our topics participants tonight, but a clear winner, ladies and gentlemen, Nick Lacani. Well done.
Awesome. So good, Nick. I do have 2 other quick comments. Elaine Nibberding, thank you so much for inducting our 2 newest members. Great job. And also, guests, we're always happy to have you with us. And I will now turn it back over to our Madam President, Lois Montgomery.
Thank you, Patty. Fabulous job. Jesse, we so enjoyed your time with us. But let's find out what our guests thought. And we'll come back to you, Jesse, and see how you like the online presentation. Willie, what did you think about our meeting? I know it's a little bit different with a guest, but did you enjoy yourself today? And Willie, you have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. Okay. I enjoy myself because I learned something new for Jesse for the presentation. And also how table topics are conducted in the online presentation. That is different for us in Singapore. Thank you.
Thank you. We hope to see you back during a regular meeting so you can see how awesome we really are. Trisha, I know you are still a guest and you're planning on joining, but we'll ask you anyway. What did you think about the meeting?
I like the format. I like the informal format. It was different than the other meetings that I've attended. So it's always good to get a variety. And it's wonderful to have a guest speaker. So good topics. And I learned a lot. So thank you.
Thank you. Rushan, I think you're a member, right? I know you go in and out. Are you a member or a guest at this point?
Yeah, I'm a member, but I travel a lot. And every time I come and attend the meeting, I enjoy.
Okay.
Right now, I'm enjoying, I have to take my son to soccer right at this time. So I thought today, I'll just take the meeting from the car. So
Okay.
I really enjoyed Jesse's presentation. I do a lot of conference calls and presentations without looking at the audience. So, you know, those moments that I looked up, that happens every day for me. And I don't know how that impacts the actual delivery across the phones. I'm going to read that article and see if I can learn anything more. Thank you.
All right, well, thank you. And like Jesse mentioned, become a friend of his on LinkedIn and you can talk to him through there. Jesse, what did you think about the meeting? Did you like our speaker?
Yeah, no, I thought it was a wonderful meeting. And I'm just thinking about what a warm community Toastmasters is internationally. I mean, I've been to clubs in many different countries, and you know, each club is unique, but each club brings that same warmth and familiarity, which is such a nice thing. So welcoming.
We are very happy to have you. Thank you again. Couple of items before our 9 o'clock. I need a Toastmaster of the Day next week. Who would like to step up and take on this amazing role? Going once, going twice. We do voluntold if somebody doesn't want to step up. Carol, are you going to be here next week? Jim Barber.
I'm scheduled to speak next week.
You are, that's right.
I'm not sure I'm going to be here. Sorry.
All right, we will find someone for that role. Also on November 30th, we are having a speechathon. Roger will be putting more information out about that, but please mark your calendars for November 30th, whether you're just going to attend or you're actually going to be giving a speech. That rounds us out. We are at 9 o'clock. We're going to officially close the meeting. Please sign up. There are a number of roles. Like I said, we need that Toastmaster of the Day. I will be staying on for another 5